In today's episode of Today in World War II, February 13th, the Finns are getting more and more desperate. The U.S. Senate approves a $20 million loan package for Finland, but there's a catch. The F4U Corsairs finally make it to the Pacific Theater for the Marines. The Allies drop weapons, more and more weapons to the French resistance. The Allies start firebombing Dresden, and the Soviets on this date capture Budapest. Let's get started. Okay, so on today's date, on February 13th, 1940, the Finnish Foreign Minister Tanner he made a desperate plea to his counterpart in Sweden that they would send troops to Finland to help them hold off the Soviet mammoth offensive going on right now. In the last few days, I've talked about this in previous videos about the fact that the Mannerheim line was about to crack. The Finns were desperate and they were hoping that beyond hope, but there was really no chance that was going to happen, but they still tried. The Swedes said no, of course. They didn't only give their pitter patter about it was their neutrality. They also said, look, if we do this, if we send troops, we're worried that the Germans and or the British will use that as a pretext to go in and capture their iron ores in northern Sweden. Churchill was already plotting to do that. The Germans were already plotting to do that. The Germans were already planning the invasion of Norway, and they would have loved to secured those iron ore mines with their own troops. Churchill would have been more than happy to send English troops there to do the same thing. So Sweden was stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I get that. But again, it's sad that nobody helped Finland. And even though if we look at what's happening in Ukraine, there is help going to Ukraine. And they have been helping, but it's never been enough. They need more. And there's still too much cowardice in the Western allies' uh, political calculations. Okay, so you can really compare what happened with Finland in 39 and 40 and what's happening now in Ukraine. And it's scary. It's actually very scary. What should not be scary to anybody would be to subscribe to my channel. In fact, it's really darn easy if you think about it. All you have to do is just click on the subscribe button and click the bell. And that means that you'll get notified by YouTube every time I drop a new video. And it'll help me with my algorithm because the more subscribers I have, the more people will get shown my content in their feeds. And, like-minded people like content that I put out. And so it's just a question of finding the people that this resonates with. And by subscribing, you help me in that process. All right, on today in February 13th, 1940, the U.S. Senate approved in principle with a vote of 49 to 27 a loan to Finland for $20 million. Now that was a lot of money back then. I don't want to do the calculation right now how much that would be in today's money, but it was a big chunk. But as always, there was a catch. The catch was that Finland was not allowed to use any of those funds to buy munitions or any kind of arms or implements of war. That's like a man is drowning and you throw him a shrimp cocktail instead of a life ring that could save his life. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. It's like Switzerland. They produce arms to countries, but they put conditions on saying, okay, we'll send you all these top level uh, weapons, but you can't use them. You can't send them to somebody else who needs the help. You can only use them for you. So it's like they put conditions on weapons. Is that not ridiculous? So this was worthless. The bill wouldn't be passed until 2 weeks later. By that time, it was almost all over in Finland. So chalk this up as, useless um, gestures, cowardly gestures. It's not cowardly, however, if you like and comment on my video. And I just explained to you why it's important for you to become a subscriber that's even more important to like each of these videos that you watch and leave a comment because, again, subscriptions, subscribers, likes, and comments, that is like catnip for the YouTube algorithm. That's what helps grow a channel. So please, if you like my content, like and subscribe and leave comments, okay? Appreciate it. On February 13th, 1943, the F4U Corsair fighter plane finally made it to the Marines in the South Pacific. They had been fighting with the F4F Wildcat, which was obsolete. It was a nice little aircraft. It could and did do a lot of damage to the Japanese. It was very well armed. It was well armored. It could take a lot of punishment because it needed to because it could not go toe to toe with a Zero. But they needed to have a air superiority weapon, a fighter, and they finally got it. But don't think that the Navy was being really generous about this because the Navy had already determined that they wanted the F-6F Hellcat on their plane. They felt that was a better carrier adapted plane, so they let the Marines have, in this case, their leftovers, which turned out to be, treasure. One man's trash is another man's treasure. And Marines love these things, and with all of course they did because it was one of the best fighters in the war. So in this case, they're in their very first operational sortie. They escorted a U.S. Navy Catalina to search for shot down Allied planes or pilots, about 200 miles north of Guadalcanal. So this was bad news for the Japanese. It was going to make the attrition of their Air Force and naval and Army Air Forces get much, much worse. On February 13th, 1944, the Allies dropped weapons to the French resistance in Haute-Savoie. Now, they were doing this all the time. The reason why I picked this out is I want to give you the context of this. The overall their operational strategy the Allies had was they wanted to use the French resistance to delay, harass, and in some places defeat any kind of German counterattacks that would happen after the Normandy invasion. And they were so effective that, by the time Patton was able to break out of the Normandy pocket, get through those hedgerows, and start sweeping across the French countryside, he didn't have to worry about his flanks because the French resistance was guarding his flanks. That's how successful this strategy was. I am very critical of Eisenhower and different generals who I feel deserve it, in my opinion, on my channel here. But I will say that that was a brilliant strategy, and kudos to them. What I feel like was not a brilliant strategy was on February 13th, 1945, the Allies, the RAF, and the 8th Air Force started firebombing Dresden in eastern Germany. And this is very controversial to this day. The instigator, I think, was Bomber Harris. He was the head of the RAF Bomber Command, and it was his personal obsession to firebomb and destroy most of the major German cities. Now, I understand completely what happened in the Blitz. The Germans were firebombing. They were trying to destroy all the British cities. I get it. Okay. Dresden was a tricky one. There was no military use, no military purpose to bomb Dresden. There was nothing there. Unfortunately, because it had not been bombed previously, there's like, tens of thousands of refugees were there seeking shelter because they had been, they were retreating from the Soviet onslaught, and they got caught up in it. And the casualty rates were not quite the level of the atomic bombs, but they were close. It was just horrendous amount of casualties. So I don't know. I'm on the fence about that, but I don't see a military necessity to have done that. But I understand where they were coming from. So don't get me wrong. Okay. I'm kind of on the fence, a little bit wishy-washy. Okay. And finally, on February 13th, 1945, the Soviets captured Budapest. They had laid siege to it for about a couple of months. There's been some attempts to break through, didn't work. And I think it was like the last 16,000 German troops had been killed or captured. So that was it. The Soviets were able to capture Budapest. I personally as a lover of Europe and a lover of the history in Europe, I'm very happy that the Soviets did not raise it, they did not destroy it because the architecture there is breathtaking. So good for good for the Soviets. I'm glad it worked out that it did not. Budapest and Paris and Rome, for example, they were not touched. So very, very happy about that. Well, I want to thank you for watching this video. I can't wait to get you another one tomorrow.